Hey everybody, this is Tyler with Fortune Auto. Today we're going to be showing you how to install coilovers on a BRZ. Alright, now we got to get access to the top hat nuts, and to do that we got to take the liner out of the trunk. So that's what we're going to do now. All right, we're gonna start on the rear, and to get this off, there's 3 bolts on the bottom of the control arm. We're gonna go ahead and get those out. I usually start from the inside, work my way towards the outside. I'm gonna start with the sway bar in link. Then we'll move on to these 2 17s for the coilover and the knuckle as well. So before we slip the bolts out, I'll start with the shock itself. Sometimes you gotta tap it out. And then the knuckle. And then you can just kind of move the control arm down and out of the way. And then we'll move up to the top and take the 2 top hat nuts off. All right, we're gonna go after these 2 top hat nuts. If you unbolt it, the coilover is going to drop. So either have a friend catch it, or with this car, you should have enough room to where you can reach over the fender and hang on to it. That way it doesn't fall onto the ground. All right, last one. Grab a hand on it. All right, so now we're gonna set the preload for the rear coilovers. The reason for preload is so that at full droop, the spring isn't loose, isn't bouncing around. So it's just to keep everything tight and snug. For the rear, we like to set it at about 1/8 of an inch. So it's a 7-inch spring, so we'll compress it 1/8 of an inch and then lock it down. All right, so yeah, 7 inches. So we'll go ahead and compress it. All right, so yeah, that's about 1/8 of an inch. All right, once your preload is set, go ahead and lock it in place. Snug, there you go. And then we'll get it on the car, and then we'll set our ride height. It's gonna be kind of hard to hold it in place and try to reach into the trunk and thread it on by hand. So if you have a friend with you, that's the way to do it. But if you're working by yourself, which is the way I'm gonna do it, you set it in place, and then you can put the bolts in the control arm, and the control arm will help support it, so you can get into the trunk and thread the top hat on. So that's what we're gonna do. Once we're set in place, we'll use the control arm and just let it rest on the control arm while you line up the bolt. There we go. Now that you've got the control arm supporting it, you can easily thread on the top hat nuts. All right, so now we got to line up the bolt hole on the control arm with the coilover. If you're working on jack stands on the ground, you can just use a jack and compress it. I've got this auxiliary jack. Go. And one thing to note, before you torque all these bolts down, you want to make sure that the car is under load. To set your ride height, you just want to twist the body of the coilover. If it's too tight, you can use a supplied tool and hook around here. But you twist it. It's just righty-tighty, lefty-loosey. That way to lower the car, or you can back it out to raise the car. Once you get it set, you lock your ring down. tighten the set screw. There you go. And proper torque specs, the 5mm locking ring is 11 foot-pounds. The 4mm, 6 foot-pounds. Proper torque specs for these bolts. This one's going to be 28 foot-pounds. This one's going to be 88.5 foot-pounds. And this outer one's going to be 66.4 foot-pounds. And the top hat nuts we set at 35 foot-pounds. Now we're going to move on to the front. All right, we're going to start off with the ABS sensor wiring. Let's compress the tabs on the plastic clips. Pop right out. Just get the brake line off. Now we're going to take off the sway bar end link. We'll start at the top and then we'll move on to the bottom. The top's easier because you have access with it with an impact. Bottom's a little trickier since there's no room for an impact. You can disconnect it from the other side and it'll droop down. And then you can get access to it, or you can just get a wrench on there. Maybe go the right way. There you go. And then sometimes, I don't know if you can see that on camera, sometimes when they're worn out, if you're trying to turn the nut, it's going to spin. So they've got a little Allen key slot there. You can just put an Allen key in there and hold it and just turn it off with a wrench. Go after the two bolts on the knuckle. They're both 19s. Just wiggle it and they'll slip out. Set it aside, and then we'll move on to the top hat. All right, now we're just down to the 3 top hat nuts. And just like the rear, when you break it loose, you want to have your hand on the coilover so it doesn't drop. There you go. We'll go ahead and set preload now. All right, just like we did with the rear, we're going to set the preload, but with the front, we're going to set the preload to 1/4 of an inch. Snug this down, just like the rear, about 11 foot-pounds. Slide it into place, line it up. Bolt in. These sway bar end links is another situation where you want to have the car on the ground or at least the suspension loaded up so you can adjust the height correctly. All right, so these spacers, they go on the stud first. I don't know if you can see up here, because they'll slip into the backside and kind of lock into place. And they'll also slide into the sway bar itself, so they lock into place. See how it locks in there. All right, and then once you get the car on the ground or the suspension loaded up, you twist this bar in the middle and that raises and lowers the height. Once you get this adjusted, these 2 jam nuts, top and bottom, they're 14mm. hold it in place with this one. Both 14 mil. And then same as the rear, we're going to twist the body to raise and lower the car. Once you get your ride height set, go ahead and lock it down. Just tighten down that pinch bolt. Again, 6 foot-pounds roughly. If I can. Last couple things, don't want to forget your brake line. And your ABS sensor. These 2 bolts here, the proper torque spec is 114.3 foot-pounds. And torque spec for the end-link, top and bottom, is both 44.3 foot-pounds. And lastly, these top hat nuts are 19 foot-pounds. And that's how you install coilovers on your BRZ. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out to us, email, phone. We'll be happy to help you out.